Hey, we want to welcome everyone to You and the Law podcast show on Facebook Live. We got a great show for you today. We've got several guests who's going to be joining us on the podcast show, uh, and but I need to introduce the man of the hour who goes by the name of Chief Swag, who is one of the co-hosts of the show. And my name is Virgil Green, and I am the co-host of the show. Chief Swag is the host of the show. How you doing today, brother?
What's up, brother? Hey,
Not a
I'm.
ho-
You know what? Man, I'm so glad you finally got it right after all these episodes, man. So I'm glad you got it right finally, man.
All right, all right. Well, hey, we got a topic we'll be talking about today that uh, hopefully a lot of people will tune in and join us as we talk about the concern with ineffective counsel from public defenders, how people are represented when they are facing criminal charges, when they cannot afford an attorney. They have to get a court appointed attorney. So uh, we're going to bring in our guests to join us. We're going to bring in first Rand Eddy, who is an attorney here in Oklahoma City. Uh, want to welcome you to You and the Law podcast show, Mr. Eddy. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
Hey, we know how busy attorneys are, so we're definitely thankful that you took some time out to join us on the show today.
Well, my pleasure.
All right, all right. So let's bring on our other guest, uh, Melissa
Yes. Uh,
Hurry.
yes, hello. I'm having issues with my camera. I'm trying to fix it. So,
Okay, all right, then. Okay, well we'll let you work on that. We can hear the audio part of you, and we're going to bring on Bree, who is also a supporter of Michael Gaines. And so, Bree, how you doing today?
I'm good, thank you.
All right, all right. Well, hey, so we had talked before, Bree, and you had reached out to me and said, "Hey, would like to come on your podcast show to talk about a topic that you guys are involved with, and something that I think a lot of people who will listen to the podcast show will become more informed about what happens to individuals when they are represented by counsel, but maybe that counsel is not uh, somebody who has their best interest. So we've got an attorney on who will give us some advice on some legal matters and what some of the procedures of the court, how those things handle when people are facing those criminal charges. So we will, Mr. Eddy, why don't you just let everybody know what your practice is about, how long you've been in practice, and kind of just a little bit of background about yourself.
Sure. I've been practicing here in Oklahoma City for over 35 years. Right now, I'm in private practice. My practice areas include civil rights. I do a lot of employment law, representing employees, and I do a little bit of criminal defense. Um, I started out as a public defender, as a young lawyer, as a state and federal public defender. So
Okay.
I have a lot of experience in that field.
Okay. Well, and that's why I reached out to you, and because I knew you would bring some expertise to the conversation about the topic of what we're going to be talking about with Melissa and Bree. And so, Bree, why don't you jump in and tell us how did you get involved with Michael Gaines' case between you and Melissa? How did you guys get involved with Michael Gaines?
I got involved. Someone had actually just brought it to my attention, just cases. And I come from a family with law enforcement background. So I was interested and just said, well, I just want to hear a little more. And as I've heard more, I became more and more involved and more interested in wanting to find out how this happened and the injustice in the case.
Okay. And Melissa?
I actually got involved through Bree because we connected on social media, and I saw that she was advocating for Michael. So I looked more into his case, and I read his petition, and I saw his story, and I was just intrigued to find out more. And we connected that way, and we've been connected ever since.
Okay. So, how long have you all been involved um, with Michael's case, being, activists to help him or help his family?
I have been involved helping him for several years. It was just in the last couple of years that I decided to take it into a social media aspect, to try to
Okay.
get help and reach out to people to see if we can get help on how to fix the situation.
Okay. So, Bree, why don't you kind of give our listeners a little bit of background about Michael Gaines, you know, kind of briefly about what happened back in 2003, because this incident took place in 2003 in Lawton, Oklahoma.
Yes. Just real briefly here, Michael was involved in a situation where he was hanging out with a group of friends. The friends are a friend, I should say, and the other two gentlemen he was not familiar with on a friend level. But two of the older guys involved, Deontay and Daniel, had a personal issue with the gentleman who lived in Dante's apartment complex. Dante and Daniel decided to rob them. They had kind of solicited the crime throughout the community for about a week, maybe. Finally, no one really wanted to do it. The guy that wanted to do it kind of pulled out last minute. So they decided that they would lace a blunt with PCP, give it to whoever they got to, ride with them, and get them to assist in the robbery, but not willingly, but under the influence. He ended up going with them. They ended up getting him to smoke the PCP, and he went to knock on the door of the apartment. And at that point, he had no idea that a robbery was going to take place, let alone a murder. He knocks on the door, and the other two co-defendants run in, rob the people, the apartment, and one of the owner of the apartment ends up getting shot, and then his best friend ended up dying.
Okay.
Then after that all happened, Michael was not a suspect at that time. He became a suspect when Daniel's attorney told him that they had to have someone that, I guess, his position in him shooting someone fell on. So that's when he involved Michael. Michael then became a suspect. He turned himself in when he had a warrant was issued for him. He did turn himself in, and he turned himself in with his attorney, or with an attorney. When he turned himself in, they told him that his attorney was not allowed to go in with him for questioning or anything. He couldn't have her. She did advise him not to talk to anyone unless you had an attorney present. They ended up still bringing Michael over because they told him they saw he didn't have an attorney on file. And at that point, they questioned Michael. He asked for a lawyer while being interrogated. They still went ahead and finalized the situation. Daniel and Dante had a chance to put the story together the way they wanted it. However they wanted the narrative to fit, that's what happened. They had paid attorneys. Michael later on ended up getting a public defender. His public defender and I did talk a couple of times. He did advise me that he did not have a defense for Michael, and his words to me were because he was kind of overworked and had a very excessive workload. And so his only defense was that Michael was too young. He did go into Michael's mom because he didn't have a defense. He went to his mother, told her, "You need to tell him to plea the way I asked him to, because if not, they're going to kill your son," kind of using a scare tactic. And that did work. His mom did try to talk to him, and Michael still did want to go to trial because he knew he was innocent of committing any crime, and his lawyer would not let him. He brought a gentleman in that was an ex-death row inmate and had him come in the morning that Michael just of Michael's trial or court date, and he ended up scaring Michael into listening to what his lawyer said, and his lawyer told him, "Go in and plead it, whatever it is they say, agree to it, and then I'll take it from there and work it out for you." But that did not happen. they wanted Michael to come in and plead guilty to a robbery, and they promised him a 20-year sentence. And when he did say he finally agreed to a 20-year sentence because he thought he was going to get the same thing that Daniel and Dante got, he ended up being told that a murder took place at the same time. And because of that murder, they were going to charge him with felony murder in the commission of a robbery. So he had no idea what any of that stuff meant or what was going on. So
Okay. So let me go
he
back
did
to
later on get information. Oh, go ahead.
No, so I want to go back because you brought up that when he was initially arrested, that he appeared with an attorney. Was that an attorney that the family had got for
Yes.
him, or what? Okay, so you're saying that the investigators with the agency did not allow his attorney to go into the room while they were questioning him?
That is correct. They told her
Okay.
she could not go in with him. They turned her away at the door with him.
So Rand, I want to get you to kind of jump in. That's not typical for
No,
okay.
not at all. Even without an attorney, if a suspect being interviewed tells law enforcement that they want an attorney, under the law, questioning is supposed to stop immediately.
Correct. Yeah.
Sometimes that doesn't happen, and in this instance, this is even more egregious, not letting an attorney who's actually accompanying a suspect into an interview room.
Yeah. Okay.
I have a question. Thank you all for joining us tonight. What would be the purpose, or what would be the advantage for someone not to let someone's attorney in the room when they're questioning? I mean, that's just wrong. That's wrong all over the place. And I don't even see how someone would even have the nerve. I mean, as a police officer, as a police executive, if I found out that one of my detectives did that, we'd have some problems. I just don't understand. That is the excuse me, that is just that's astounding. That's just baffling that you would do that. I mean, that is you learn that the first week of the academy, that if you read someone their rights, or even if you don't read someone their rights and they say, I don't want to talk to you, that's it. Or if they say, I want to have an attorney present, why would you not allow them to have their attorney present? Wow.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the initial concerns when talking with Bree about this Michael Gaines case, is that there were some concerns that were later found out how this agency investigated this crime, and the fact that if a person says, hey, I can't talk to you, I mean, I want an attorney, then that means you need to stop talking to them and allow them to have an attorney. And if that attorney says, hey, my client is not going to talk to you, then that stops the interview right there.
Well, you know what? One of the things that I did is that I would always, even if the officer on the scene read someone their Miranda rights, and even before I would start questioning them, I would also read them their Miranda rights. I just, I know they said once you read it, but I just wanted to make sure for me that they were advised of their constitutional rights. But I have never told anybody that they can't have an attorney present. I mean, that's what the Miranda says. You have the right to have an attorney present. Anyway, I'm gonna get off that. I'm just baffled with that. As a matter of fact, it makes me mad. that makes me mad that would occur. So anyway, I'm gonna get off that and let finish. You all are. I know you all want to talk, but that just frustrates me that happens. That's how we get knocked 20 yards back in law enforcement, stuff like that.
Yeah, and this took place in 2003 in Lawton, Oklahoma, correct, Melissa and Bree?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So, you said that the attorney, the public defender went to Michael's mom's and said, Michael's mother and said, hey, get him to take this plea deal. And apparently she did talk to him and try. I mean, did she talk to him and try to convince him that this was the best thing for him to do?
She Well, he told her that he was going to die. And of course, her not having knowledge of how the system works or how quickly that happens, she was scared. And she said, we'd rather have you alive than dead. And, because she was scared that they were going to take her son's life. And he still went against that. And because he didn't want to do that, he did tell them that he was going to go in and tell them he wanted to go to trial. And so the morning of, like I said, they brought in a guy named Ernest Harper, who was an ex death row guy that got off, and I guess he got his paralegal and started working with the OID's office, and he came in and gave him a good scaring that morning. Before he went in, and they said, hey, all you have to do is go in and plead guilty to robbery. They're going to give you a 20-year sentence, and from there, we'll be good to go. And Mr. Bowen told him, that was his lawyer, he told him, he said, go in there and agree to everything, that the judge says to you. And for that, and anything that goes wrong, I'll clear it up at that point. And then Michael ended up getting a life without parole.
So Rand, I got to ask this question because apparently there was a person uh, who came in, I guess, in some kind of scare tactic to get this young man who was only 18 years old at the time to convince him to take this plea deal. Uh, have you ever heard anything like that?
No. I've heard of persuasive arguments and almost scare tactics with regard to lawyers communicating with their clients, but not bringing in someone who'd been in prison or in death row or something like that. Sounds like there's a lot of violation of constitutional rights that went on in this deal, though.
Yeah.
You got
Yeah. And I think this is so. Melissa and Bree, Michael has served how many? He served over what 20 something years in prison. Hello.
Did you say how many years has he been in?
Yes.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
He's been in almost 20 years. Okay.
Okay.
Michael's been in almost 20 years.
Okay. So I want to get to a question that we've got from Blake Shannon, who says that's a quick way to get a case thrown out with all of the video technology installed in most police departments, specifically interrogation rooms. He states that this is absurd to know it is still happening. Blake, you're absolutely right. In 2003, hopefully the Lawton Police Department had that type of technology inside of their interview rooms to where it protects the agency as well as it protects the person that they are interviewing. So that's a real good question. And another person who replied to Blake Shannon, they of course conveniently don't have video. So I don't know, Melissa or Bree, have you all asked any other additional questions about how his rights were protected or were not protected?
We have tried to, get to the bottom of a lot of what we feel was not handled properly. I did request Michael's, all of his court paperwork, and he did request it 3 times. They never gave it to him, and when I did call for him, and I want to say it was like in 2019 possibly, they said they had forgot to write him and contact him. about wanting his casework. So they destroyed all of his paperwork. So he doesn't have a lot of the personal things that would have happened between him and his lawyer as far as notes or anything. So it's really hard for me to get to the bottom of a lot of things or how it even got to this point because we don't have a lot of case paperwork. The only thing we have is just the things that are made available to us through the courthouse. We have asked for his interrogation video, but they are saying they don't have to release that to him.
So Rand, what is the procedure?
But Melissa did tell me that he does have. Oh,
no, go ahead. You said
go
Melissa
ahead.
said. No, you said Melissa.
Oh, I was
said
just
he
going to say
had-
Melissa, and I had talked about it with her. Melissa, can you tell them what you told me again about Michael's rights to getting his video?
What conversation was that?
I don't
Bree?
know if she's still there. Oh, there she is.
Can
Yeah,
you hear
she's
me?
there.
Okay.
When I was asking you if Michael had the right to have his.
I think Melissa,
phone's
she's
cutting
asking
out.
you about the
We
video that was, I guess, Michael's video of his interrogation. Do you have some information related to that?
I'm not sure, Bree. I don't remember the conversation.
Well, remember I was asking you if he had the right to get that, because remember they denied Michael his right to having his interrogation, and you had told me that he did have the right to get it, but there was a process he had to go through.
Yeah, and I don't know that. I don't know if they ever did anything with that, but I remember vaguely having that conversation with you. But I do remember having the conversation where they actually destroyed the file without notifying him as well. So I know that was limited information that was received there. And I don't.
So let me ask, Rand, I'm going to ask you this question. What is the, how long should an agency obtain, hold that information related to, especially when you're dealing with a murder case? How long should that agency retain that information?
If it were me, that information would never be discarded. It's important when you got someone that's in that type of situation in prison and a life without parole. There's always a chance. There's post-conviction possibilities, pardon and parole board. That information needs to be kept and protected.
Hey, Mr. Eddy, when I was in Arlington, and same thing in Little Rock and also Norman, we kept it unless there was it was a capital conviction and there was an execution. We kept all of that, and I remember we had large storage rooms full of it was called homicide storage, and it was just stacks and stacks of stuff. But I remember there were 2 executions related to a couple of those cases, and I would just remember the amount of evidence that we were able. Of course, we had to get a court order to destroy it, but once that person, and there's stuff that's kept forever. Especially like you said, if a person's not convicted of convicted and sentenced to death, but you're right, even if their life in prison, there's a possibility that they could, they could win their appeal or whatever. So I believe, and I'm a firm believer, you've got to have a strategic, organized property room. When you have that type of evidence needs to be secluded, because you can never tell an attorney that I don't have your client stuff or it was contaminated.
Yeah, that's not good.
Yeah, and so it's amazing. It's just amazing. It's amazing.
Can I say something about that as well?
Yeah, go ahead, Melissa.
This I feel like this is not even just exclusive to Michael Gaines's case, because I'm involved in another case out of Oklahoma, and it's actually a death penalty case, and there's been discovery withheld in this case, and it's still almost 23 years later that all the discovery has not been produced. I mean, I believe it was last legislative session, Representative McDougal even proposed 2 House bills that dealt with open file discovery and dealt with retention of records because it is such an issue. The bills didn't pass through. I don't even think they made it through committee, but they were proposed, and it was the last legislative session. So I don't think this is exclusive to just this case. I think it's a problem. I've seen other instances. There was actually I don't want to bring up too many other cases, but there was one case I was reading a deposition from a state forensics crime lab employee who swore under oath in this deposition that, now this is talking about Oklahoma County, that they take evidence from this evidence room and they bury it by the river. How ridiculous does that sound? But this is actually a woman testifying to this under oath in a deposition.
And this is somebody that works for a state agency?
This was the state. I mean, it's public information. There was a transcript of a deposition. Her name was Elaine Taylor. She worked in the state forensic lab, and she testified to the fact that they destroy rape kits and evidence in homicide cases.
Wow. Well, Mr. Eddy, what do you have to say on that?
Well, I haven't heard that. I hope that's not the case. That's would be absolute. It's a violation of the law.
Yeah.
Now they get pretty protective of files and don't like to release them. That kind of issue has come up in the Julius Jones situation that's been going on. But that kind of conduct is there's no place for it in the justice system. There's just no place for it.
Yeah, exactly. So we've got a couple of questions I want to get to real quick. We got another question from Blake Shannon who says, would the interrogation video be considered public record like body cameras?
No, I don't think it would be public record. No, it's law enforcement. They've got investigative confidentiality principles, and sometimes they like to expand those beyond where they should apply, but I don't think that's something that the general public would have access to.
Yeah. Well, even with body cameras, that's pretty limited based upon the nature of the what that body camera has. Some information would be redacted. So, and I think some people who are not familiar with the law or with police procedures would probably think that certain records would be public record, but some of them are not. We got another question from Mike Norris who says, you keep it forever, even after the inmate is executed on a capital case. So you're absolutely correct, Mike. That is something that agencies should have a pretty good policy, Chief Humphrey, about the procedure for evidence. And I mean, if you got an evidence room, that evidence you should have policies that are pretty detailed.
Well, you got to get a court order. You can't just discard that evidence. I mean, you have to get a court order, and the judge has to approve that. So you just can't go and just get rid of it. So
Correct.
Judge might say nope, hold on to it.
Yeah.
But I'm just still trying to get back at it. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be repetitive and sound like a parrot, but goodness gracious, man, why?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, and I think one of the things that was disturbing that Melissa had stated that this person with the state agency said in a deposition that rape kits and other evidence were taken to some river and would be destroyed. And guys, Oklahoma, this isn't just something that is a problem for Oklahoma, but it has been something that's been in the news in Oklahoma about how law enforcement agencies submit rape kits to the state crime lab, and that there is such a backlog in those rape kits. Uh, there is policies are in place for how you supposed to keep those rape kits and store those rape kits, even after the state has tested that rape kit, and that rape kit goes back to that agency who submitted it. That agency is supposed to retain that rape kit indefinitely. So in case something ever comes up, and that was the investigating agency, that agency is able to go back and uh, discover that rape kit. So um, it, it, there's a lot of things that we're talking about tonight that is real concerning when it comes to how uh, minorities are represented in the criminal justice system, and just anybody in general. Because again, uh, you can go back and you can look at cases, and Mr. Eddy, you can comment on this, that if you have an attorney and it, like OJ did in his trial where he had some high powerful attorneys, those attorneys they're working for you. And if you have a public defender who has multiple cases, and in this case, according to Bree, the attorney representing Michael Gaines was out of the Tulsa area. So he's way on the other side of the state, traveling to, the southwest part of Oklahoma. So that would, and he's overworked. And I think, Rand, you can answer this question. You're a public defender. Is that something that is typical for public defenders to deal with multiple cases?
It is, unfortunately, but this lawyer, if he was overworked to the extent that he couldn't prepare a defense for his client, he had no business representing that client. That goes beyond just public defenders. That's any lawyer. You have an ethical responsibility to represent your client. Now, it's built into our justice system that money, if you got a lot of money, you got a lot better chance of getting justice. Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah. And it does happen. There are, there are public defenders as well as just private lawyers that don't represent their clients very well. And this instance sounds real, the fact that he's from Tulsa, traveling to Lawton, if he's saying his caseload's heavy, like I said, he shouldn't have been in that case at all.
Yeah, well, and you got to ask the question: were there not any public defenders in Lawton, Oklahoma, which is in Comanche County, or any surrounding areas of Lawton, and even a public defender out of the Oklahoma City area? Because Oklahoma City is not too far from Lawton, but it makes you question how the courts made sure that Michael Gaines had proper representation, no matter what type of, whether he was on trial for murder, whether he was on trial for some other kind of, simple burglary.
Right.
You still need that have right to counsel. And I think, we've talked about this on our podcast show previously with me and Chief Humphrey about, there's a case out of Alabama that we talked about. It was a case where Anthony Ray Hinton, who was spent over almost probably 30 years in prison for a crime that he did not commit. And but it was the Innocent Project got involved with this case, and his character was portrayed in the movie Just Mercy. So when people say that, oh, well, hey, if you get convicted of a crime and this was by a jury of your peers, you must have committed the crime. Well, that's not the case always, because there are people who, Anthony Ray Hinton is a good example, and there are so many other people who have been convicted of a crime, spent 20, 30 years in prison, and then it's determined that they did not commit the crime.
That's absolutely true. There's been 3,000 people exonerated since 1989 of crimes that they didn't commit. And the only way that we can measure wrongful convictions is through exonerations. That doesn't tell us how many people are still in prison who are not guilty, trying to prove their innocence, which is quite the bar. You know, you have so much stacked against you once you are convicted of something that you didn't do. And, you know, I think there's so many limitations on that now. The AEDPA limits you to one shot. You know, you can't file any successive petitions. It's very hard to overcome that bar, even if new evidence is discovered. But yes, there have been 3,000 people, most currently, that the National Registry of Exonerations lists that have been wrongfully convicted and exonerated.
But let me ask you, I do have a couple of questions. So our country is built on equal justice, fair justice. Everybody's innocent until proven guilty. But at the same time, why is it so difficult to have cases reopened? I mean, if there's additional evidence that comes forward that says that conviction may be questionable, there might be some concerns. Why does it take so? Why is it such an uphill battle to even get a case, them to review a case, to you know, to see if they should, if it should be reopened? I mean, that bothers me. And I'm not saying that everybody that's in prison is innocent, but like the young lady just said, over 3,000 individuals have had their convictions overturned. But if you look at stuff, I remember looking at Brian Banks. I just recently looked at Brian Banks, and I know some of that there might be a little bit extra in there, but just that case and the movie starring Michael B. Jordan when he was an attorney, you know,
Yeah.
where you have the prosecutor saying, "I'm not going to do it. I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to do it." I don't get that. I just don't get that. If this system is supposed to be fair, why would you not allow new evidence to come? And there's a possibility that new evidence may not help that defendant. But why would you fight not to allow that to come forward?
Yeah. So Rand, what if a person who is not familiar with the law, such as Michael Gaines when he was 18 years old, his mother, she's not familiar with the law. What can a person do, if anything, in that situation?
It's a very difficult situation. You know, the appeal process happens quick. You know, that you get the direct appeal goes pretty fast. And if certain issues aren't raised, you know, they're lost forever. And later on down the road, some of the only options for inmates are post-conviction remedies, which are very limited.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, and Rand, and I think one of the things with talking with Bree, that Michael Gaines has pretty much exhausted his legal avenues related to his appeal. I think we lost some audio with Rand. I think he's still talking, but we can't hear him. So let me let him know that we lost audio with him. But we've got a message from somebody with Justice for Jones, who stated at a recent deposition in federal lawsuit against Host Close, which, if people are not familiar with Host Close, he was a former Oklahoma City police officer who was tried and convicted and is serving, I believe, I don't know how many years in prison he's serving, but he stated who is represented in the civil litigation by famed exonerated attorney Catherine Zellner. Taylor admitted she personally witnessed boxes of evidence from sex crimes, homicide, and other cases being burned and shoved in a big hole by the Oklahoma City River.
This is the you know, spoke of. This is exactly what I was speaking of when I mentioned that. It was I didn't say it was the Holtz Claw case, but yes, that's what I was talking about.
Okay. Okay. So we've got another comment from Mike Norris again, who says money drives the system. It's rare that a rich defendant is wrongfully convicted, but a poor defendant is. And I think,
Mhm.
Rand, that is a good, that's something that definitely impacts the minority communities where uh, if you don't have the money, you're gonna end up sitting in prison. If you got the money, uh, your chances of not going to prison are pretty good. And if you do go to prison, you're not going to be there for a very long time. So, we're talking about that wrong, people who are wrongfully convicted, and especially when it comes back to our poor marginalized communities.
Mhm. I did a study on race and wrongful convictions for my stats class last year, and over 52% of all exonerations. I say exonerations because I know that does not represent all the wrongful convictions, but 52% were African American men, and that is
You said
about
52% were African American?
yeah, 52%. So I mean, that's about roughly they make up about 13% of the U.S. population, but they were wrongfully convicted. Out of all the exonerations, 52% were black.
Mhm.
You
Okay.
know, I'm from Dallas, born and raised in Dallas. And a few years ago, I don't know if you all are familiar with Craig Watkins. He was the first African American district attorney in Dallas. And Craig started going back over cases, um, and started reviewing cases. And I believe before he left office, he may have had almost 20 cases of individuals that were exonerated. And it was just stuff that you wouldn't think. I mean, just holding evidence from the defense attorneys and things like that. But I was on a panel with one of the gentlemen that had spent 18 years in the penitentiary for a crime that he didn't commit, and he told his story. And once he told his story, I walked up to him, as a representative of law enforcement, and all I could do is tell him I'm sorry and give him a big hug. What do you say to somebody like that? I mean, what do you say? And I asked him, how do you not have hate in your heart? He said, because you have to forgive. If not, it'll eat you up. And I was just
Yeah.
amazed at the resilience of this young man. But I just think about it. You have that district attorney that was willing to look at these cases, and you have some that aren't willing to look at it. So
Mhm.
I mean, that is just there's no telling how many more he was not able to review, to have overturned.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Rand, I want to ask you a question. This was something Bree brought up during our conversation with her, that the public defender that represented Michael Gaines waived his preliminary hearing. So, can you let our listeners know, those who are watching, what is the procedure when a person is arrested? They go before the courts, and uh, what procedures when it comes to such as your preliminary hearing and other processes that the courts are dealing with? Can you hear me, Mr. Eddy? Uh, I think we're
Virgil, he
still
was
having
he was signaling early. He was having problems with his ears.
with his ear. Okay, all right, yeah, because I don't,
Mm.
yeah, can't hear him. Okay, so hopefully we can get Mr. Eddy back on. We just kind of lost his video feed there, but so I think it's real important for people to understand what process for individuals who are going before the courts. And if you have an attorney who is not fully trying to represent you, then
Mhm.
those are some concerns that the court itself should be made aware of.
Mhm.
So, Melissa, did you have a comment?
I was just going to say, Attorney Eddy had mentioned that, these cases, if you have an attorney who's not representing you properly at trial, and in the court does not acknowledge that as insufficient counsel, then you were barred for bringing evidence at a later time that was available at that trial. So if you have an attorney that didn't bring that evidence at trial, the direct appeal is not to reintroduce any evidence. Your habeas petitions are not to reintroduce that. They will not let you introduce that evidence at any time in the future. You're barred from introducing anything, from bringing anything that was available to you at the state trial. And this is the problem that we have. I'm very involved in Julius Jones's case, so I know a lot about his case. I know a lot about Michael's case, and this is what I'm in Connecticut, but these cases drew me into what's going on in Oklahoma. Okay. And so when you don't have an attorney who properly represents you, like, as in Julius Jones's case, his attorney didn't even call a witness on his behalf. No alibi witnesses, no nothing. And so now you go forward, he's convicted. Now, they'll say, well, he's gone in front of so many courts. He's gone in front of the state court. He's gone in front of the appellate court, the Supreme Court, the district court, the circuit court. But each time you go in front of those courts, you still cannot introduce that evidence that wasn't brought up initially because you were never properly represented. So
let me ask you this question. So who is doing this on Michael's behalf? Is Michael doing this himself, or does he have some outside resources who is helping him file these appeals?
No, Michael is actually filing these things on his own because he doesn't have any legal representation. And what Melissa said is right, because Michael has tried to reintroduce, when he did find out years later that one of his co-defendants admitted that he drugged him involuntarily. Michael used that as new information or new evidence to present in court, and they keep telling him he has a time bar and that he should have raised that at the time of. But you can't raise something at the time of if you didn't know it at the time of. So he's been barred from pretty much bringing in anything new for his case unless he didn't raise it adequately. And that would be the only way someone could maybe go back and help him raise it the proper way, because he doesn't know the legal way of actually doing it. He's just trying to raise these things the best that he knows how. And I see that someone had asked a question, if that's okay that I bring this up, about how come Michael got life without parole and the other co-defendants only received 20 years. And that's something that's always been an interest to me as well, is how is it that Michael is serving a life without parole and he did not pull the trigger? He did not prepare this crime. He did nothing. He was actually kind of a victim of the crime because he was taken there against his will. How did he end up with a life without parole?
Well, and that's a good question. That question came from Lillian Booker, who, said, why did Michael get life without parole and others got 20 years? If it's felony murder, shouldn't that apply to everyone? So apparently the way you all explained it, Bree and Melissa, that the other two individuals had a legal counsel that was private legal counsel, and they took some type of plea deal. Is that correct?
Yes, they were offered a 20-year deal, I guess, to turn the finger and blame it all on Michael.
So what about the person who actually pulled the trigger?
He is also serving a life without parole, but he as well was drugged involuntarily as well. And that's pretty much what caused him to make that wrong decision, is because of that. But even when it came down to them searching homes and everything, they didn't find anything on Michael. They didn't find it in his house or at his grandparents' house, anywhere. But they did find the stolen goods in Daniel and Dante's home because they were the ones that prepared the robbery. This all took place because Deontay owed Chris money, and he took a coffee table from Deontay as collateral. So everyone's lives changed behind a coffee table. They
Wow.
tried to say Michael was the one that put this together. Michael didn't know these people at all, but Deontay and Chris lived in the exact same apartment complex. And Michael's lawyer did not question one person about this. None of the material witnesses, nothing. He didn't question anybody. He didn't question anybody. He didn't prepare anything. He walked in blind and he let Michael walk in blind.
Okay. So we're coming up on last few minutes of the podcast show, and we definitely want to thank you all for coming on You and the Law podcast to talk about this important topic that you all are involved with in trying to seek some type of, of, of assistance for Michael. And I guess my question, Melissa and Bree, uh, what if anything will help Michael's case go before the courts? Because it seems like he has exhausted all of his resources. So when the things that you all have shared with us, and the things that the attorney listened to, Ran Eddy, obviously there are some concerns how his rights were violated during this process. So what, if anything, can be raised to assist with him? Obviously, he's not going to get a new trial because he's already been in prison for over 20 something years.
Bree, I don't know if
Melissa, do you want to answer that?
well, I was going to say, I believe.
Can you?
Yeah, we can hear
Can
you.
you? Okay. So I believe that you were trying to assist Michael with going through the commutation process, which is another question. I mean, we both know that this bill was pending to limit commutations to exclude people who have been sentenced to death and exclude people who have been sentenced to life without parole. Luckily, that bill did not pass. It would have had to been had its third reading today. It was on the House calendar, but it never came to the floor for a vote. But these are the kind of things that they're trying to do. I mean, you have people who are sentenced to death and sentenced to life without parole, and I just don't understand why anybody would want people who have legitimate innocence claims to be prevented from proving that. They don't want to take accountability for being wrong. They don't want their convictions upset. They don't want to have to come back and say, oh, we were wrong, unless there's some kind of scandal that breaks out. And in Oklahoma, they've had 39 exonerations since 1989. This is when the National Registry goes back. They started recording exonerations in 89. So if you look at those 39 exonerations, there's a whole bunch of them that were due to false or misleading forensics, like bad forensics. Now, if you look back to the time period when those occurred, Joyce Gilchrist was in the crime lab. And I don't know if you're familiar with the scandal that.
Oh yeah, yeah, we are. Yeah,
so
yeah.
you gotta look back and you gotta say, okay, I think something that's really important to stop this is conviction integrity units, but they've got to be sincerely operated. You can't just exonerate people because you got caught out in a scandal, and you have to. And this is what is happening in some states. It's happening in Texas too. Like if you look at Harris County, they had a whole bunch of exonerations, but it was because a scandal broke out there, and most of those were attributed to that. Cook County, Illinois, Chicago, same thing. Scandal. Their conviction integrity unit had to exonerate a lot of people. So these units are coming forward and saying, look at the people we've exonerated. We have large numbers, but it's because they got caught up in scandals. They're not sincerely reviewing all these cases. It's almost like only if they absolutely have to. And I'm not saying that's every conviction integrity unit, because some of them do operate sincerely and they do, try to exonerate innocent people, and they do try to fix past mistakes, but they're not all doing that. It's very deceptive.
Okay. So guys, so how can people learn more about Michael Gaines? Because I think it's really important for people to, I know there's a petition.org, and so give out some information to those who are watching the podcast show as to how they can find out more about the Michael Gaines case through that petition and other things that you all are trying to do.
Well, he does. I have a social media account set up on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, all social sites, but he does have a website, most importantly. It's www.justiceformichael.org. All of the social sites that I have are linked to it, as well as his petition. You can go in there and find out any information. They can inbox and ask me any questions where I'm able to help them out with any information that they feel like they don't know or something they'd like to understand better. They can do all that through his website.
Okay. Okay. Uh, All right. Melissa, you have anything further to add?
I just I know I keep going back to statistics and how many people have been exonerated and how many
Yeah.
wrongful convictions we've uncovered already. But the National Registry of Exonerations is a great resource. If anybody wants to know more about wrongful convictions and how they happen, they can definitely find that out on the National Registry of Exonerations. It was created by Samuel Gross. It's a collaboration of a few different law schools, and they actually have. I'm doing my thesis right now, comparing death penalty exonerations and life without parole exonerations. Because another thing is that to abolish the death penalty, life without parole is a crutch. So if I fully know and believe that there are definitely people who are guilty, who are on death row, who should not be, set free into the public, right? But there is also, you have to consider the innocence factor. So once somebody if you are taken off death row and you are given life without parole, even if you have an innocence claim, your exoneration rate goes down to like 1%. When
Okay.
it's higher when you're on death row because you get continuous representation. That's another thing. Life without parole is essentially a death sentence. You're sentenced to die in prison, but
Yeah.
you're not guaranteed that same representation you are if you are sentenced to death and put on death row. So life without parole is very concerning to me. There's over 56,000 people in the United States who have a life without parole sentence, and that's a lot of people.
Yeah.
And
It is.
so I think we need to revisit I'm not saying to eliminate the life without parole sentence, because obviously even I don't agree with the death penalty. I know some people do, but I don't. And if someone is guilty and they are sentenced to death, I fully agree with life without parole versus the death penalty. But I also again believe they're using life without parole, and there are people that do have innocence claims who have been given that sentence, but they're not able to, if you can't afford to hire an attorney, you don't have one, and you're never going to overcome that sentence on your own.
Yeah. So are there any, have you all been contacted by anybody who is interested in doing some other things related to Michael Gaines' case, to kind of get it more out in the public? Because, Bree, you said, the news media has, uh, they are not going to go back, 20 something years and bring up something unless something that was a high profile case. So are there any other
Absolutely.
media outlets that are that you all may be in contact with, or are trying to raise some awareness to Michael Gaines's case?
I have been contacted by a company. I can't disclose their name at this
Yeah.
time, but they are
Okay.
interested in Michael's case. They've seen his website, they've seen the Facebook page, and they have contacted me, and they're very interested in wanting to do a docuseries over his case. But they do feel that we do have to have this exposed a little further, bring more
Yeah.
attention to it, to help bring awareness to what's going on in his case.
Yeah. Well, and hopefully, our platform with, you and the Law Podcast Show will bring more awareness to Michael Gaines's case and to many others. But, we're actually talking about Michael Gaines. And so hopefully this helps in some kind of way, because, Chief Humphrey and I are, two Black men in law enforcement. This podcast show is to be very open and transparent with those who listen to our show, and because I think even though we are in law enforcement, We do know that there are things that are not right within this industry, and corruption does happen. And so it appears that from the beginning of this, Michael's rights were not uh, uh, acknowledged by the detectives with the Lawton Police Department, and so things that obviously you have to go back from the beginning to how he got arrested and how he ended up in court and ended up being convicted of this crime. So hopefully this will help uh, get more information out about his case. So
Hey, Bert,
Chief Humphrey, you have anything to add? Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I would be remiss if I didn't inform the listeners that there's an amazing police chief who's a very good friend of Virgil and I,
Yeah,
in Lawton, Chief James Smith. He is an amazing guy, very ethical. He holds his officers accountable, and so I can assure you that would not have happened under his watch.
no,
I'm very
definitely not.
comfortable in saying that. It's a matter of so. I just want to make sure everybody understands that was before his time. He's been there about 10 years now.
Yeah.
And he is doing an amazing job in Lawton, and the department is regaining its reputation, a reputation that the community deserves.
Yeah, exactly.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. Well, Melissa and Bree, we want to thank you for coming on the podcast show and talking about Michael Gaines. And if there is anything else that we can do with our platform, uh, please let us know, and we will definitely get you back on the podcast show. I know an hour is not a lot of time, so we definitely want to get you guys back on again and to talk more in depth about it, and hopefully we can get Mr. Eddy to come back and join us, because I know his knowledge of some criminal procedures will definitely help you guys. And Melissa, you sound very knowledgeable about what you're doing, so hopefully you guys can really help this young man who's been sitting in prison with life without parole for over 20 something years.
Yeah, we're good. I will continue to be here to do whatever I can do. I've been in the field of law. I work in state government now. I work for a watchdog agency here in Connecticut. So
Okay.
I actually work for the Office of State Ethics. So just I've seen so much. I used to work for a criminal attorney, so I saw how the system works. Even here in Connecticut, it's these things aren't exclusive to any state. They may happen more often in certain states than others, but it happens everywhere, and I think we need to recognize that. And I try to push for conviction integrity units. I've done a lot of research. I try to voice my opinion on that whenever I can, and Oklahoma doesn't have one. I don't know when they will implement one, but I feel like it is essential, and not just for death penalty cases. There's been legislation proposed to have a conviction review unit for death penalty cases. But again, we're forgetting about those people who were sentenced to life and life without parole, who are stuck in the system and have legitimate innocence claims. So
Exactly.
that's why I'm trying to bring more attention to those, those sentences as well, just like Michael Gaines.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Chief
Virgil,
Humphrey.
Virgil, I'm insulted.
What's that?
You never tell me I'm knowledgeable. These two young ladies are extremely knowledgeable. They are extremely knowledgeable, man. They're brilliant in their form, but you never tell me that I'm knowledgeable on anything.
So Melissa and Bree,
Talk to the hand. Talk to the hand.
well, I have to acknowledge that my co-host is a very knowledgeable
There we
person.
go. Overdoing it now, Virgil.
Yeah, but guys, we definitely thank you for taking the time to come out, and hopefully this does raise more awareness about it. And this podcast show will be uploaded to our Facebook page of You and the Law, will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. So people, if they are not able to watch it live today, they'll be able to go back and watch it at any other time. And then hopefully the audio portion will be uploaded to other podcast platforms where people can hear that as well. So again, we want to thank you all for coming on. If there's anything that we can do further, you've got my contact information. Just let me know.
Thank you so much for having us on. I apologize for the
Wonderful.
camera.
Thank you so much for having us.
You're welcome. Chief Humphrey, you have anything to add?
No, after all the abuse, I have nothing to add.
See, guys, this is what I got to put up weekly. So, I want to remind everybody that definitely tune
Well,
in.
thank you guys for having us.
Well, you're welcome. And we want to remind everybody for make sure you tune in next week, next Thursday, same time, 6 p.m. on Facebook Live to You and the Law Podcast Show. You guys have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good night, everybody.